introduce Kanyon. Do you prefer just Kanyon or Coyote Woman? I know that that's another name that you go by.
Both work. A Kanyon Coyote Woman.
Okay. So it's a really brief introduction. We work with Kanyon, usually during monitoring or always during monitoring around, well, she's a Coast-to-Noan Ohlone, Mutsun, and Chumash Native American. And her mother, N8V Sayers, we worked with her a lot in Santa Cruz especially. Kanyon is an artist, poet, published author, activist, student, teacher, lover of life, traveler, all of the above. She believes that by honoring the truth in history, we can bridge the gap between Indigenous and contemporary value systems, and that's why we wanted to involve her voice today. It's stemming from the previous Ask Me Anything of being an ally and reaching out to different communities, especially those who we work with, and trying to understand the relationships that we're creating and we need to maintain in order to be ethical archaeologists and community. And I also want to mention that the original theme or the topic of the day was Indigenous solidarity and allyship, kind of going from the previous conversation that we had. But I spoke with Kanyon yesterday, and she mentioned a story about a conference she was at, and the theme was Ask a Native. And personally, I would never say that because it's not my territory, and I think it's very it's too direct, and I'm not one to interrogate. No, I ask a lot of questions. That's unfair. I do, but it's just not my place to really, be putting people on the spot and expecting answers. But she proposed that, so, and we are here, and that's the point of it. But I will let her just go with it. And during this conversation, let's use the little chat box to pose things. I'm gonna try to be a mediator of some sort without talking over one another. And this will be a discussion, but we just need to make sure that no one gets frustrated trying to voice. Oh, there's Jeff.
I've already copied the resources that Kanyon's put into the chat box into the Compass comment for this.
You're so quick. I always fuddy that around and screw things up, but thank you. Okay, here you go, Kanyon. Thanks for being here.
Mishmin Tuhis, Conrakat Kanyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers Roods. I am daughter of Tribal Chairwoman Anne-Marie Sayers of Indian Canyon Mutsun Band of Coast-to-Noan Ohlone people, aka Indian Canyon Nation. I am a very privileged California native, able to say that I was born and raised on the land of my ancestors, where my grandmothers have always been. I recognize my privilege in having been raised in a both tribal, traditional and intertribal environment, where Indigenous protocols and culture sharing was a normalcy, so to speak. I am the founder of Indian Canyon Two-Spirit Society. I identify as Two-Spirit, dominantly female passing, she, they, them, Coyote, intermingle, non-offensive, not picky. I recognize that that in itself is also a privilege. I use it to signal and to voice inclusive and equitable conversations in the spaces that I have the opportunity to navigate. Founder of Kanyon Konsulting, LLC, bridging the gap between Indigenous and contemporary value systems. I shadowed my mother as a youngster with cultural monitoring. So my mother's been protecting sacred sites since early 80s. And from that, I am just kind of following her footsteps, as well as trailblazing into other arenas with the skills and opportunities that I have. So I'm on the Native American Heritage Commission list, finally, helping my mother get way too much mail. And it's always interesting because many organizations tend to be familiar with everyone's on, they can write off work or validate that something is an expense, yet us as a Native group, we don't have any like corporate entity or business. So like when people reach out to us, it's an interesting space. Like many times everyone else is on corporate time, corporate dime, yet the Native person is like, come on Native, do your song and dance routine. So it's always interesting in certain spaces as a Native person. And so I'm definitely here to offer resources, to share. I'm a being that is an in-between. I recognize that I'm really lucky to have the upbringing I have, as well as an empathetic nerve to understand why some of the challenges that we navigate are coming up from us being disenfranchised in mainstream society, but also our education system has not done reasonable due diligence in honoring truth and history. And so when you have that collective mindset bringing us up, there are certain ways that we come to navigating conversations and belief systems and behaviors that we don't even know we might be committing, like cultural faux pas or navigating in culturally insensitive conversations just from being curious. So the reason why I said ask a Native is because Greg Castro and I go to a conference that's called PantheaCon, and we decided to put on a circle, a conversation, a panel, and we open it to other Native peoples. But the way we tip the scale is, if any of you have ever been in any environments where some people take a lot of space, they grab the microphone and they talk a long story. Sometimes that tends to silence the Native community voices. So what we decided to do is make it an anonymous forum where people write on an index card and put it into the box, so they don't have to feel bad about their inquiry, or maybe some people are nervous about some things. We even had some Native people's offer some questions that were common to us and them. So we had backup in case no one asked questions. Ironically, we were flooded with questions. We almost didn't get to cover it. We've been doing this for 3 years at this conference called PantheaCon, and it's the Ask a Native Forum, and we're like backed by popular demand, and it has been really fun. And so Greg Castro and myself, and then whatever Native community members decide to be present, are given the opportunity to share voice. And there are times where we have polar opposite answers, but majority of the time, most of them were very compassionate and a little perspective over this way, a little perspective over that way. And so I'm all about being present in this circle. And I do want to say that I only speak for myself. There might be times that I might speak for my community, i.e. my mother and Indian Canyon, or I will say what I've observed in my life and what I have conversed with many of my community or mentors. I will bring into that purview, but at the same time, recognize that I, being a Native, can't speak for all Natives, but I want to offer insight as an in-between and as a Coyote. And so how long of an intro should I do? So I could dive right into the questions. I could offer perspective of some of the resources I've offered. I want this to be an open, safer, brave space, so to speak. There's things that I'm still learning. So I mean, like, I'm optimistic about what I could offer here. How is being authentic problematic? Well, I could be authentically me, but I might offend some elders. And then if I'm going to be an authentic Native, well, I'm not totally sure when it comes to be authentic, because I know that I could be true to who I am. However, there is this thing that I'll call born again traditionalists, where I've witnessed community want to reconnect to culture, and we lean to archival materials, written ethnographies and journals, which is very beautiful and painfully necessary when it comes to taking steps towards decolonization, that we have to ironically lean to settler colonial academia to help us reconnect. However, when we connect to these truths, some of those truths are of a certain time. Let's say a parallel to people taking the Bible literally, of a time. depending on the environment, the social and societal constructs. And so when I see that question, being authentic or problematic, because like, I know an example, cameras and recording. So I both know that some recordings of the past were not perfectly authentic. They shared language, they shared song, yet sometimes some of our elders and community members were either paid off or did not want to divulge a lot of information about our culture, yet at the same time still needed to provide something. So either sometimes the cadence of a song or when or how it was shared might be different. And then today, like when we think about the ghost dance, when we think about, well, the Native American did not have the right to practice religion freely until 1978. So it wasn't safe to be Native. During the gold rush, $5 a head, 50 cents a scalp to eradicate the California Native. So not many Natives were going to be out loud and proud. And so it wasn't safe to share your authentic self, your true self, and how anyone could really show up in community being themselves. And so when it comes to recording songs, many Indigenous relatives are like, don't. One, it could be taken out of context. It could be disregarded, disrespected. And so today's modern technology, however helpful, is not seen in that light. And so it could be problematic. Like my authentic self would love to record things and share things. However, I recognize how my elders and community members may not appreciate having recordings of ceremonies, having recordings of sacred songs, because we don't know in whose hands they are or may have access to, and then what will be done with them. Are the people learning them or using those resources or assets or archived materials in a respectful fashion? Are they even meant to even have access to it? And that can be problematic. What is one of the most challenging questions is from the conference? Which conference?
The Pantheon?
Oh, I can't fully remember all of them, but like, what are your gods and goddesses want, or how can I? It was along the lines of like instant access, where they're like, how can I talk to or pray to your ancestors, or how can I be here without feeling bad? It was a really beautiful inquiry. Like, it was said delicately, and I had to tamper down my immediate reaction, like, oh gosh. And so I had to set it down. But it is the flavor of, I call it settler colonial entitlement. And it's this energy of gimme, give me access. I'm going to put the labor on you. I want to know this now. I don't want to do the relationship building and community building and the bridging before I ask an immediate question. Kind of like, let's think about Google real quick. Google, how do I change a tire? Cool, got instant access, easy, simple. And then, hi, you're a local Native person, or like Google, can you tell me your sacred coming of age ceremony for your young ladies? Can you tell me the sacred songs that are sung? Because I really want to know. It's like, no, you're not even in our clan. You're not part of our community. It could be a male asking that song. And so, yeah, Christine?
I just have I just wanted to mention also that in our discussion yesterday, you wanted this to be recorded for future use. And because I don't want people to feel uncomfortable with recording you as you're talking about. Yeah. I just wanted people to know that. Yeah.
Yes, it was discussed beforehand. That's the best part. So what I love and appreciate is, this is what I try and encourage people to signal. So living on Ohlone land, an event that transpired with Karina Gould, Anne-Marie Sayers, Chief Colleen Sisk, Ruth Orta, and then I was invited to be by my mother's side. They had asked us, would it be possible to record this and have a Facebook live stream? All of us consented, and we did. One elder said, please don't record the beginning ceremony. and the offerings. It was Chief Colleen Sisk offering to Karina Gould and Ruth Orta because they are the original stewards and caretakers of Huchin, aka Oakland. The beautiful occurrence was they said, are there any other questions you have or concerns? I said, hey, you're asking us privately if it's okay to record. Can you ask that in front of the audience? Because sometimes the audience doesn't know this in-between occurrence has transpired. And it's very, very helpful to signal to the community and the audience that these things are considerations that we have. I recognize that, and I recognize a lot of in-betweens because I'm lucky to be on stage in these spaces that I'm like, how else will people get a chance to learn? Because some people are like, oh, I already see a camera up, or I see someone else holding a phone, or someone said it's live streaming, so we're all entitled to it, we're allowed to. Somebody else is doing it, it's okay, you know, sheeple. And so, yes, that in-between is always important. And so, and then like I had the Native people's bait in the Ask a Native, just in case we didn't get any questions. And I saw the same penmanship, and one is like, is Native culture is Indigenous culture a monolithic culture? And it was really fun and awesome to talk about that for a moment, because like there are people who go like, Native American spirituality says X, or Native spirituality this, that, and the other, and it's like, oh my gosh. But like I even talked about, if any of us ever hear about Native American shamanism, how problematic that is, because shaman is a word from another territory. Our own communities have our own words for doctor, for healer, for medicine carrier, and it's colonization that has impacted that. And so it's problematic to perpetuate shamanic practices and shamanic rituals. I understand why we use it today. However, it's still problematic. The same thing with the word Ohlone. I am a proud Ohlone person. However, if someone is going to be a teacher or an educator around Ohlone territory or around Ohlone education, when you say the Ohlone tribe, you're lying. There's no such thing as an Ohlone tribe. The word Ohlone, if someone doesn't know the history of the word Ohlone and knows that it came from a singular village site, and then it was colonization that impacted it and perpetuated it and distorted it, and now teachers are like, the Ohlone tribe were once a blah, 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 blah. Thank you for your exclusionary tactic and putting us in the past tense in sentence number 2 by saying that we were or we used to be. Who am I? Chopped liver? Like, I get so frustrated, and I hold this anger, and I recognize that I can't unleash it to someone who is wanting to educate young beings, usually 3rd and 4th graders, but anyone, because like it is valuably placed anger, but it's misplaced if it's weaponized against an individual. And it's painful because my hurt is valid. My anger is valid. And we need to have these opportunities to be heard. However, if I weaponize it and accuse people, their defensiveness is real. And of course, the fragility is real because, well, the fragility comes from not having the opportunity to navigate these difficult conversations. Usually people who are in the position of being put into other, like the only bodied person in the room, the only brown person in the room, or the only white person in the room. When we're put in the position of other, we're given the opportunity to, I don't know, strengthen ourselves in navigating some of these sensitivities. And also what we may or may not want to do to replicate those negative occurrences, not wanting to hurt someone else by the things that we've been possibly hurt by. So when I think about the word decolonization, I recognize that it's destructive, it's breaking apart. So efforts of decolonization is questioning the information that we have, questioning the origin of why things are currently the way they are. I always try and parallel it with re-indigenization, because it's reimagining or engaging with efforts of an indigenous mindset or indigenous pedagogies that can be brought into our day-to-day decision. So like decolonizing your diet, well, thinking about local sources, taking care of everybody. But the problem is if all of us started decolonizing our diet and try to go back to original sources, let's say of California, one, we would impact the ecological system so drastically and so negatively that it would not be healthy. But if we re-indigenize our methodology of going about it, we might be able to start thinking about, oh, instead of using pesticides, we have dandelion and we have these other edible foods that might be invasives, might be pioneer, or might be volunteering themselves into our gardens. But when we engage in re-indigenizing our methodology of sustaining ourselves, that means we can sing to our plants. We can thank the plants. We can appreciate the medicines that they provide. We could care about how ethical and sustainable harvesting methods. And I'm an omnivore, meaning same thing with the animals. And that being said, it's not just like going back to an original diet like nothing ever happened, because if you think about how drastically we've impacted at least just California, we don't have many of our indigenous resources, our cultural resources that were here before contact. Bringing it back, beautiful. Yes, let's put forth those efforts. However, when we think about decolonizing our methodology and things, it's considering breaking apart why things are the way they are, from as simple as our governing system. I recommend that if you look up the Iroquois Confederation, you might notice that our Constitution has a lot of origin, or the founding fathers yielded a lot of insight from indigenous peoples, yet they cherry-picked it. They cherry-picked the convenient parts that were convenient to them, and they did not have an accountable understanding of the thorough knowledge that they were taking from. And that's what I see Americentrism is really focused on. It just takes and takes and cherry picks, but doesn't have a solid relationship with where it's taking or gleaning information from. Same thing with the English language. It's a predatory language. So, side note, if any of you recognizes Live Long and Prosper, this gesture is a hand gesture that is done on Star Trek. Star Trek is a wonderful sci-fi show that actually has an alien language, the Vulcan or Klingon language. The individual who perfected that language, his name is Mark Okrand. He got his PhD in my ancestral language, the Mutsun dialect. Yet, if he was brought up with indigenous pedagogies, everywhere he went, if after he got his PhD and he trailblazed and had many opportunities to share that language, it is his own intellectual property rights. It is his own creative form in creating an alien language. However, if he was an accountable being, he would be announcing everywhere he goes that he learned from California indigenous languages, that he got his entire education through learning from indigenous peoples, and that there are many still here. There are many reconnecting and relearning their language. When we think about accountability, when it comes to when many of us are in this academic field, we can build our entire career off of these studies or these ethnographic materials or archaeological materials or cultural or societal patterns. Yet when we lean to other things and other people, where is the reciprocal relationship? Where is the accountability and humility in what we gather from? Like, gimme, 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 gimme. How are we giving back? I wanted to go around the Society for California Archaeological Conference and ask people, so how many of you have ever written an article about any given tribe and interviewed Native peoples? How many of you gave that article or report back to the Native peoples or told them, I'm going to present this at the conference. Would you like to hear it? Would you like to hear what I'm talking about, you? and I got feedback from community members saying a lot of people may not give you an authentic answer because it's really like it's a question like right if said right into someone's face, they might be like and so I'm trying to find ways to be like so how many of us have reciprocal relationships, and so when it comes to that kind of behavior, it's humility. And it would be nice to know, because like there are many times just I as an artist and as a singer and a culture bearer, I tend to a lot of people interview me and a lot of people ask for my photograph, and I say, hey, send me a copy, or when your article's done, send it to me, or if I'm filmed, I would love to see the clip when it's done. I'm going to venture to say 70%, maybe even 80% I don't see. So I mean, like, there are people taking and taking from me, and yes, some of them are artists, and I'm forgetful. I'm a being too. I slip up. However, when people are reminded, are they showing up and are they offering back? And I just want to keep that like circle going, that reciprocal circular effort of offering and taking and humility, because it's really a challenge. And like, I, as a Native person, navigating academic circles, like, I am an articulate person. Many construction workers will even say, like, you have a $10 vocabulary. And I myself say I can't keep up with academic circles because just I'm not I'm not very I'm not an academic. However, even with that, like, my cultural knowledge and cultural resources are stashed away in colleges and in libraries that I, as an individual, will never have access to. Yet, non-Indigenous, new academics that may not even care about who they're impacting or how their writings will impact have full access to a lot of data about my community. And similar in the past has transpired when it comes to some archaeological firms of the past, especially, 70s, 80s, 90s. There's a different social and cultural dynamic, the desire to gather data, study, and research. And then there's Indigenous communities who might be, let's be sensitive, let's leave it be. And then, of course, you have a construction element, let's get the project done element. And so, like, I'm seeing the overlap and the in-between now. I'm really blessed and happy that this is a more collaborative and collective space that we can converse and have these opportunities. And so I'm really happy to witness some of them. I'm still always learning more about them. And of course, I tend to hear some negative things too. So that's an interesting one. And so I tend to, I'm a being who, well, I'm a coyote. My segueing nature tends to offer perspective and have fun with conversations, because I enjoy interacting with communities like this. I'm happy that you're here in this conversation. Feel free to ping and question. If I go off on a tangent, I can loop back around. I even had an elder at an archaeological firm ask a question. It was a simple one. Yet I managed to say a few things and say a few other things, and he just looked at me. He's like, wow, you didn't answer my question, but you looped around and you wrapped around and made a beautiful bow. But you still didn't answer my question, because I was scared of the question. I can't even remember what the question was, but I remember the feeling I felt and the being called out by an elder. And I remember it felt like a great compliment and an atrocious, like, call out all at the same time. And so I try and use my skills for good. Which one? Indigenous uses of imported objects. Oh, I'll take an example.
Let me, real quick, I'm bringing this up because one of our projects that we're working on right now is about artifacts. And the two other members on my team, Alicia and Marnie, we met earlier today, and we're focusing on Indigenous uses of, well, I don't know, historics, imported goods, like European, whatever. And so we're trying to collect a bunch of articles and references to wrap our heads better around it. Because right now our library within EndNote, Albion's library, I'm not sure how bulky it is in that degree. So we're going to collect a bunch, cross-reference, whatever else. But like finding, and like obviously we need to do more talking with people. And yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling now, so I'll let you go.
Two things come to mind. Tending the Wild, the book by Kat Anderson. I believe she did an interview with Julia Parker, or Julia Parker wrote a book, and it was about processing acorns. And in the last chapter, it mentioned using a blender or a coffee grinder to work with the acorns. Like, we have our traditional methodology, and there's a purpose and a reason, and then we utilize resources available to us, and not presuming that every interaction that Native peoples have leans to the best technology available to them, because there are many times that is not that is not the case. Sometimes it might be when it comes to technological advances, sometimes not. I had a great conversation with Linda Hilkema at Santa Clara University, who has been doing a lot of research around cultural survivance and persistence during the mission period, and noticing from as simple as tool markings on abalone shell with certain tool markings saying, like, even though the newer technology or resources were there to do something leaning to more traditional methodology to do a final part of tool working on something, and then also utilizing metal and other things on other parts, so utilizing resources available. And so that's where I say, like, re-indigenization, utilizing an indigenous mindset about what's being done or how it's being done, and then utilizing a resource or asset towards that goal. So from as simple as, well, dogbane is not as abundant in some of our areas, or tule is not even as abundant. I don't have, so much of the land is now private, and having access to cultural resources is damn near impossible. And it's painful because, like, think about the conversations of organizations like, well, I'll say, like, Peninsula Open Space or State Lands Commission. They talk about opening the land for public use and public access, and how great it is and how wonderful it is, and yet still Indigenous peoples do not have access to their own land that their ancestors have traditionally stewarded since time immemorial. We still do not have access to our cultural resources. We cannot hunt. We cannot even gather our cultural resources without being fined or penalized. Yet the public gets solid access because they're entitled to it. Is a really painful occurrence that I have to sit through, and then I have to tone police myself, and then I have to think about civility politics so I might be able to be heard in their own venue in how they try and silence Native and Brown voices. It's very frustrating because I'm like, my passion is valid, and my anger is valid, but I have to silence that just so I can be heard in these circles. And so it's very hard. And similar, like, there are tools and resources that we could utilize to do things faster. And sometimes it's good to do things slow. Like, we might have a blade instead of maybe an abalone instead of a bone, or yeah, it's possible, or shirt, or obsidian, or yeah, the bone, to cut tule. Yet at the same time, the intention is there, the prayers are there, the methodology is there. And so I'm still learning and growing myself, and I'm always happy to connect. Storytelling and oral tradition is very important, and we need to celebrate our elders and our culture bearers who have this knowledge. So offering resource, i.e. recording conversations, seeking permission or opportunity to learn from storytellers, elders, culture bearers, and traditional community members is really, really important. And so it's always exciting to see people interested in that kind of digital archival. Because can you imagine if we overlap modern day technology with traditional stories and value systems, like, let's say, like an interactive map. We have a map, and then it acknowledges the original names, not exact locations. And of course, I'm not a fan of GIS when it comes to creating cultural resources and sacred sites, because there's a couple of people out there who feel entitled to know where all the native sites are. I'm for keeping that safe. Like, archaeological firms, they're going to have access. Sacred Lands File will have access. However, different people are like, I call them like rock hounds, or those who look for arrowheads or cultural resources, and like, we're entitled to learn of these things. I'm not a fan of, because they're expressing their privilege and their settler colonial entitlement without accountability. And so I have been very lucky to have conversations with community members around cultural sensitivity and cultural sensitivity training. I'm pushing for that. So, like, I really hope in time, some of us who are in working with archaeologically sensitive areas are familiar with CEQA, California Environmental Qualities Act, and when it comes to botanical and cultural resources and the impacting the biological and cultural resources, we have to take a training. Like the biologist might have a pamphlet to talk about endangered species and the fines that might be included. When it comes to them signing in, and sometimes a hard hat sticker, I want to do that. I want to have a cultural sensitivity training, or at least a land acknowledgement and a cultural competency training, where you get a little pamphlet, you get a little bit of information, a little bit of empathetic connection around why we recognize impacting cultural resources is a thing, and then get a little hard hat sticker. So I started getting motivated on that, and I'm slowly developing a little. Yet I've been talking about it, so I now want to shift to I've been putting on trainings. Yes, Christina?
I think we might have, or the conversation melded in with some other things, but I'm not sure if Christy feels like your question above was answered. Do you have anything that comes up for you immediately as to ways we can do archaeology? Is it archaeology and including Indigenous concerns and questions?
I think specifically, in regards to, we were talking about how do we center our archaeology around Indigenous concerns. So how do we start, like, do things immediately come up for you? Is like, well, if I could tell all of you what to do the next time you go out there, what would you tell us to do?
I can't speak for all natives, but what I do know is when I encounter people who know about the history of the land and the systemic layers of that kind of historical relevance, like this land used to be like, well, let's say like Coyote Hills. Coyote Hills now is used as a teaching tool for kids, but they also bring in native peoples for storytelling. It used to be a dairy place, and it used to be something else and something else, but they are now attempting to honor truth and history by presenting as much as they can, and not just of a historic, look, we acknowledge that it's native, get over it. They say they have an ongoing relationship. When it comes to some of these things, I really do appreciate, I'm always excited to hear about new technologies that are considerate, like paleoethnobotany, because it's the studying of the plants, and I'm excited about studying animal remains and the environment, because that means you're not hurting or desecrating ancestral remains. And by identifying them as ancestral remains, I remember highlighting being excited and happy when I heard Greg Castro and the Native American Programs Committee pushed for a culturally sensitive layer of accountability that the conference became aware of, and took steps to present that awareness of, if there are going to be ancestral remains depicted, presented, or present in a room, giving the Indigenous peoples who are participating in the conference the heads up, i.e. the trigger warning or the opportunity to be like, oh, maybe I'm not in the position to go into that room with ancestral remains. I'm not going to do that. Like, those kind of considerations are helpful. And then just those kind of ongoing conversations, because I can't speak to other territories, because there may be some things that other community members are open to or not open to. And so I can't speak on that, but I always love learning about, especially plants and animals, because that offers a lot of amazing insight. From as simple as when I learned about the Tule elk and predation of the Tule elk, the timeline of Tule elk has them in this area over 15,000 years. That already breaks the damn Bering Strait theory. Native peoples traveled back and forth and back and forth. That wasn't the singular location of where Indigenous peoples came from. it's very frustrating when scientists tend to write in articles or reports saying, beyond reasonable doubt, we can say XYZ. Where's the humility? The minimum accountability is, with the information available to us now, we can possibly confidently present this material. Because it's problematic, because in 2014, I have a picture, I'll look it up, on one of my Facebook group pages. I still have it as a group cover. There was a museum, a curated museum exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art. And it was amazing baskets and a few other cultural resources. And it said, 5,000 years ago, Native people showed up here. The people called the Ohlone tribe. And I was just like, I myself, as a Native person who's been monitoring with the community, recognize that I know that they're referring to that wonderful arrowhead that is very unique, that is only dated 5,000 years, talking about societal and language development and cultural development of that sort. However, because they weren't accountable and said, with this information we have, they confidently said, nobody existed here more than 5,000 years ago. And that is now being presented to the public. And now the public is being educated in that fashion. This is 2014. So now people are like, all the Indians came from Africa. All the people who ever were in America came from Africa. And I'm sitting here like, it wasn't Africa then. Humans are indigenous to the earth, and humans are nomadic, and then they rest and they stay where they are home. So we have different cultures and communities that are in these areas. However, that written material says didn't exist. And it's like, and I know it was cited, and it's like, so if anything, accountable referencing to data saying, with the technology available to us today, or with this understanding of our gathered information, we could say this relatively confidently. But just leaving that little opening of, new technology may help us shift our perspective. New opportunities in the future may afford us other ways of seeing this. Because a lot of the pain points against Indigenous peoples has been people feeling so, this is this. Like, Native Americans are savages, they're dirty. Europeans coming across the ocean, not bathing. Native peoples living in their environment, knowing their resources. Oh, Native peoples don't have culture or society. We don't have one that pertains to how these people believe their priorities are. Buildings, ooh. Tools and weapons, ooh. Living in unison with the land, having their own social governing structures, maintaining their sovereignty, language, survival. They might be different, but they have their own value within their own culture and community. It's like, so when people write something that's opposing. And so I'd venture like, I would have to hang out and talk to a few cousins, because usually when I catch their energy or hang out with them more often, I then start to like, all of that information starts to trickle in. I'm like, oh, this, oh, and that, oh, and this. So do take my contact information. I mean, I'm totally down for ongoing conversations of this sort. And I'll probably have more, because at this moment, I'm like, I usually do. However, they're often a shelf somewhere. I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I have dyslexia, and I probably have undiagnosed depression. And I recognize that it is because my environment, the things that were what mainstream society call normal. No, I don't fit in. However, I work with what I got, and so I know I can ramble in some of these arenas, but I try and touch on the topics that try and hit home, because when I'm at the conference, like the archaeological conference, I'm a lot better at spitting some of these things out, because when I'm in, my empathic nature allows me to connect to people, and then I could be present in that environment, and I just catch their energies, and then I'm able to, I could jump into a flow state with them. So I just try. And so, so when it comes to reiterating around, well, like cultural sensitivity and cultural competence. It overlaps with multiple cultures, from ways that we otoliths of salmon are awesome. They tell us a lot of information about the environment. That excites me. Sorry. And so when it comes to cultural competency and opportunities of that type of awareness, like, we don't know what we don't know. And of course we can't just navigate it like, oh, don't talk about that. That might be rude or might be too edgy. There are times that some conversations are good, or questions. There's, the way I put it is, there's no such thing as a dumb question. However, there is such a thing as poor timing. And so it is good to have a curious mind, but also knowing the timing when to ask. And so, like, I've been lucky to do to engage in cultural competency or cultural sensitivity trainings. Mostly just, I started calling them Indigenous insights, because we've not been given an opportunity to have insight in these conversations with Indigenous people, how they're feeling, how history is relevant, how presentation of history is relevant in our education systems. Because, like, well, think about it. Reading, writing, arithmetic. We prioritize that for our young ones. That's great. What about introspection? What about conflict resolution? What about humility and accountability to our presence in our environmental and ecological state of being? We're creating little consumers and producers in our education system because it's a post-industrial era. Baby boomers, big populist boom. We have to start educating and engaging these young ones. And there was a social cultural dynamic of the time of what family life was and how family life was present and maintaining a status of. And then we have a bunch of little ones going to school, trying to get them fit and ready for the world to possibly have a job or do something. And there is limited accountability of a social culture of being accountable to how your actions impact the environment. It's very entitled. Oh, I don't like the bugs, so I'm going to have bug spray and I'm going to poison this for my big agricultural opportunity to produce for the masses, yet you're only producing for the human consumption masses. You're not caring about the animals, the other beings, the water, the ongoing impact of your decision, because we're not thinking about how our actions and words have an impact and how that ripple impacts holistic systems, because our Western settler colonial mindset of science is very limited. It's helpful, yes, scientific theory, break apart, put together, is helpful for us to understand how things function. However, it's limited on holistic systems. Think about it, 30% of the placebo effect is effective. So 30% where the placebo effect has been utilized has helped. Power of the mind, power of prayer, power of the psyche, power of spirit, power of healing modalities that are not identified in our Western settler scientific format or academic realm, and it gets dismissed. Indigenous cultures have said many things like smudging cleanses the air. New study says smudging the air, the smoke and the carcinogens is helpful in pulling having a connectivity with the ions and, the wonderful scientific words that I'm not going to cite right now because I will butcher it. Or genetic memory. Indigenous cultures and communities have talked about how our blood has memory. New study says our blood has memory. Oh my gosh, science is catching up. Wow, it's like natives knew something. Oh, but wait, they were devalued because they were called savage. They were called primitive. You know what's primitive? Is the nearsighted, reactionary decision-making practices of today's scientific and governing structures. That's very primitive. It's very superficial, it's very reactionary, it's not integral, it's not accountable, it is just off the cuff. Oh no, let's make a quick decision about this and deal with the repercussions later. Oh, let's only think about how we benefit from this. And so it's like, And there's something that I get flustered with is like when people try to say that they're conscious community. The Bay Area bubble, we're very conscious. California's pretty awesome in that realm. Like, a couple areas are conscious too, other cities, bubbles. However, when we use the word woke, I'm woke. Mm-mm. You're in a state of waking. You're still waking. You can't be woke because things would be a whole lot better. But when it comes to like here in Silicon Valley and here in this conscious community, there's still a lot of work to be done. Like when it comes to some of these communities, like think about if you are benefiting off of native land, if you are benefiting off of this knowledge, this understanding, if your academic career is writing about Indigenous peoples, how are you helping? Are you just benefiting so you can go forward? Like the great portion of the internet has a lot of influence from the Bay Area because we got Apple over here, we got Tesla over here, we got a internet movement of innovative technologies, and they talk about how they help third world countries. Do they know about the truth of history of the land that they're on? Do they recognize how much they benefit just from being here? Do they care? Do they want to care? And that's the struggling part is like, well, I may benefit from technology. I recognize I benefit from colonization. However, and I know I can't go back or I can't release everything of those benefits because, hey, I'm speaking English. I'm a mixed person. I have Euromud ancestry and Indigenous ancestry. I'm engaging with you on this amazing digital platform. However, I will try and continue doing this work of raising awareness and honoring truth and history with every step forward. I will attempt to be accountable, and I will attempt to recognize how I could be a good ancestor in training, in recognizing how my actions and words have impact. And sometimes that means shifting a few things, conscious-minded decisions of what I will and won't buy on going from this point on, or what I will support or won't support, supporting local artists, supporting local foods, attempting to get better. And so I feel some sort of way about the Bay Area at times. I'm very happy that I've been raised in this area. And so I'm always excited to think about what cultural sensitivity trainings can offer and afford us. I'm still developing it. So my Indigenous Insight trainings, I did one with the Golden Gate Parks Conservancy up in Marin. That was fun with the docents, and it was just insights, conversations, little workshop. I did another one with the Presidio Trust, so with some of their naturalists, and interactions. And so I wouldn't mind having a conversation about cultural sensitivity, because a lot of it is more engaging in this Indigenous mindset, like storytelling and empathy and community building and connection. Like I can only speak for myself, so I at a minimum I can't even offer cheat codes, but like I can offer insight of, as a Native person, I will or I won't be receptive to inquiries like this, that, and the other. Hence the possibility of other Native peoples having a similar struggle. Because like many times I'll get emails from relatives saying, did you get that email from that person asking that question? And I'll be like, yeah, I didn't know how to respond. And they'll say, yeah, me too. I'm not going to touch it. And so all of us might talk to each other about a topic, but we don't even want to take the time, because one, we're not even going to get paid for the labor, but we can't even take the time to point out how possibly rude or insensitive someone's inquiry could be. And so it's just kind of interesting. And so what I can do is offer insight of some of the behaviors, like these are some of the problematic behaviors that transpire and people interact with us, and then I could use that as a teaching tool, saying, hey, this is how to navigate away from that, or the other end of the spectrum, this is an example of someone I feel excited about working with because they took this effort or did this extra step or wrote it this way. So I could offer that to the best of my ability, because that's insightful and it's a way. I just read that last question. I have to tell you, oh my gosh, there was a young woman, a beautiful young woman, and I think she was mixed, and she goes, oh my gosh, you're so pretty, like, what are you? And I go, well, I'm like, what? She goes like, what are you? And I'm like, guess. She goes, no. And I'm like, just guess. And she goes like, are you Mexican? I'm like, no. And then she's like, are you Hawaiian? I'm like, no. And she's like, oh, come on, just tell me, what are you? And then, and I'm like, yes. She goes, are you like Samoan? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, I'm California. I'm indigenous to California. My ancestors have always been from this area, like the Bay Area. She goes, oh my gosh, that's so exotic. I would get it if I was in another state, another country.
That wasn't a joke.
It wasn't. It wasn't. And like and painfully, I can't even like jump on the whole like terrible joking of the stereotype, the blonde joke. I couldn't jump on that because she was a fellow. She was a brown relative from somewhere. I just never got hers. But I was like, really? I'm so excited. Ah, humans. Oh my gosh. So yeah, so I've gotten a few of those, and I get so mad, like, well, how much native are you? Like, what percentage? And like, that's a whole colonial construct in itself. Like, how much percentage? Think about purebred dogs. Think about that. They're unhealthy. The more pure they are, the limited the genetic reference points are, the more unhealthy they are. Think about European special blue bloods, not so healthy. Indigenous cultures, indigenous community members have always made sure that they don't marry or have offspring with their own community. You marry out. You can marry your neighbors, you can marry relatives, you can bond for governance structure, you can bond for the future, for love, all of these elements of different cultures and communities. However, the one rule was, don't get it on with your cousin, with your blood cousin. Indigenous peoples, we call each other cousin. It's terrible. Hey, cousin. No. And so with that, to strengthen your bloodline, you marry outside of your immediate family. Think about that. The US government wants to eliminate us. So if we marry outside, our percentage is less, and our percentage is less, and our percentage is less, and then we are devalued or not able to claim. And it's problematic because now we have this concept of blood quantum and percentage. Like, I understand genealogy and genealogical reference when it comes to accounting for who your family is and how you were raised and how you were brought up, because if you are Native, you are. Like, to me, one drop you are. It also plays into who you are in community. How do you show up and how do you walk in this world? Just because there are many indigenous peoples who may have the blood and they just don't, they're not there in community. And so it's a very challenging question. I highly recommend, I don't have the link, All My Relations podcast. It is by the woman who does the 365 photo journal awesomeness, and the one who does cultural appropriations. Episode 4 and 5, or maybe it's 5 and 6, have a guest speaker whose name is eluding me, but I know it's episode 4, 5, or 6. She speaks twice, talking about DNA, native DNA. And it's really freaking awesome. She also talks about decolonizing sex, but I mean, she talks about DNA and how amazing. Like, I really appreciate. Yes, episode 4. Thank you. Yes, can it make me a Native American? Because they're badass. Yes. Question.
People who are here, I'm going to continue. Is that okay? We can go like more than 1 hour here, right? It's been an hour. Yeah. We can continue? Yeah. Okay. Sorry for interrupting.
I was like, oh yeah, what time is it? So yeah, it's just been pretty awesome. And so that is an exciting resource, because I'm so excited to see Indigenous community members like step in and step up, because like I recognize how cathartic it is, me as a Native person being witnessed by non-Indigenous community wanting to hear, and I've been able to strengthen how I present myself. And like, there is no class, there is no circle, there is no space that other Native peoples can follow my. I wish more Indigenous community members had the opportunities I have been given, so that these opportunities can help strengthen that opportunity. And I always try and encourage people, do you have who's at the table? When it comes to decision-making practices, who's at the table? Are you including Indigenous perspectives? Do you have an Indigenous person either as a consultant or present in the decision-making practice or on staff? Because the inclusive measures that it takes to have Indigenous perspectives at the table is one step closer to having that opportunity. And yes, not all Natives have the same ideas and have the same concepts or constructs of operating in the world. However, just having that perspective in our decision-making practices is so very important. The same thing when it comes to well, just diversity. Like if we just had only, let's say, all women on a decision-making board, what about our male perspective? Or what about, let's say, if there was anyone within the LGBTQ community or like a gay male, what about their perspective? If we're going to be in a circle of community that's going to make a decision that impacts the rest of the community, it's one thing to be your own exclusive circle. We need those. We need those opportunities to be held, identified, respected, validated, and witnessed. Exclusivity can be good. However, if that presence of that group is making decisions for the broader circle of people, we need the opportunity to have compassionate empathy and opportunity to be considered when it comes to decision-making practices and processes that will impact the rest of the world. Let's think about our patriarchal system here in today's governing structures. Are we seeing it play out? My body, my choice. We're trying to tell women not to do some things with their body, yet all of a sudden we tell people to put a mask on for COVID-19. My body, my choice, listen to me. What a concept. So the irony of that. I'll be on sensitivity training. Who else? Haven't done it yet. I think in June I'm going to be doing a little cultural sensitivity training with PG&E. I'm going to see how it plays out. Because I'm still developing it. So I'm working with like interactive opportunities, because a lot of people are still just, I'll call it downloading. They're hearing it, they're understanding it, and then they want to come back with questions. And so I want to find a way to afford people the opportunity to feel okay to ask and interact. And so I'm still having fun with what interactive materials that's like breakaway questions, like, okay, break away into a small little group, and what does it mean to do this? And it feels so awkward for me to say that because it's not my way of doing things. I know it's helpful because I have been a person in a conference-like or circle-like setting, so I know it's helpful. Yet as a facilitator, it feels awkward because it's the data and the information I'm presenting is so close to home. So it's hard. So like, I get why it's useful and resourceful because I've been part of these Jedi conversations, justice, equity, inclusion, diversity, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion conversations. And they're great. And I get it because like I myself have, I've recognized implicit bias and such. So anyone else want to jump in and any inquiries? I've probably gone off on a million tangents here thus far. And it is a lot of data.
I wrote a bunch, and I hope other people feel like they can use that chat button at will.
Oh, I do want to let you know, like I myself am still learning the things, and I'm so excited about an educational resource that I recently am able to say is now in my collection, and it happens to be Native learning tools. Native learning tools, cards for decolonization. This one says, I actually posted it. I posted it on my site, and of course it's going to be backwards, or it might be right side up for you. So Native teaching aids, and then in it is go hunt instead of go fish, cards for against decolonization, and Indigenous history cards, treaties and laws, and Indigenous rights. So the cards say what year, and there's some new laws, new treaties going on in like 2012 and 2004 that I didn't even know about. I was like, hold up, wait a minute. I didn't even know about this stuff. I didn't know this was going on. Like sovereignty, like signing away sovereignty, like working with certain companies and organizations, especially around water rights, mineral rights, and other things. Like some Native peoples have to sign away their sovereignty if they get into a contract with people. It's like, hold up, wait a minute. You're talking about wanting to be collaborative and have interactions and have opportunities of collaboration, yet you're not even familiar with the rules that Native peoples have to navigate and put themselves at risk for. And some of these things I don't even know. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much. Because I'm all about saying, work with Native people, please, please, please. And then all of a sudden, like, there's special rules and considerations that Native people have to be like, to work with you involves something negative for us, which is like scary and frustrating. Like all of a sudden we might be heard, but not acknowledged. So, yeah.
I was gonna mention real quick, I have a friend recently, and I'm Guamanian or Chamorro, and we were talking, and she's like, where else would you live besides California? I'm like, I would maybe check out Guam for a little bit. It's tiny. And she was like, do you have dual citizenship? Because people don't have like territories or treaties or reservation, like all of this, like we learn about it at some point in time, but it's not well understood at all. And I don't expect people to know that, but it is just education and exposing people to, you know, what, like the people that might be your neighbors would have to go through to prove themselves on a day-to-day basis.
It's a challenge. And well, like I don't even, like we don't know what we don't know. And when it comes to some of these things, like people assume that Native peoples don't pay taxes, that we get per capita or we have casinos. Like, well, you guys have this and you guys have that. It's like, no, we don't. Nope. Incorrect. Nope. And it's problematic. And so it's like I'm trying to be like I try and acknowledge, like I have to be patient with responding to them. I have to be careful. Yep.
In that realm, and I don't know how to phrase this question, but like when you are working as a consultant to like archaeological firms and like timelines and like pay schedules or whatever else, like what complications have you come into at certain points in time? Or is it, yeah, what are your experiences with that?
So as a Native monitor, before I did it independently, I would subcontract under my mom. So I would cover for her, and I would do the invoicing for her, and it was always challenging because she'd be like, "Wait, we haven't gotten that check from so and so. Can you check on that? Can you check on that?" And so I'm sitting here like sending reminders, and it's not even but reminders. And it was intriguing because like I understand that business as usual or business as operation, like the subcontractor doesn't get paid until the contractor gets paid until the contract does right on that. But the problem is Native peoples being subcontracted, we don't have any coverage. Like we don't have this business that like has staff. Like some Native groups do, some. However, the ones that I'm familiar with don't. We're just sometimes individuals. And this is not a viable source of income. It's very helpful and it's very it is a necessity. However, it is not like this is sometimes our only, well, at a window of time, it was my mom's only source of income. And sometimes she'll only get 1 or 2 contracts in a year. Like Albion, this is my first contract of the year. I haven't been working for that. And so that being said, like even to myself, like as a consultant, I'm still learning the ropes when it comes to payments and contracts. Like how do I cover my tail when it comes to contractual work? And it's a challenge because well, when you think about us as Native peoples, when we respond to the letters of inquiry, the people who wrote those letters, the people who wrote the reports, the ones who are talking about cultural resources, it might be the project manager, it might be somebody in that position. They get paid for writing that letter. They get paid for mailing it. They get paid for responding to it. We as Native peoples, we don't. We respond to these inquiries out of the kindness of our heart and considerations to the cultural impacts to our ancestral homelands and to the cultural resources and to the ancestors. And we do this willingly because the community members who elect to do this willingly are caring about our ancestral remains and our sacred sites. And it's very challenging because, like, what do we retrospectively write a letter saying, okay, opening those letters, responding to those letters per this one contract, for that one contract, for this one, I'm going to bill this one and that one and this one. And some of them, they barely consider they barely even acknowledge the recommendation of the recommended consultation. Their idea of recommended consultation is sending one letter and possibly one phone call. And that isn't really consultation. That's following the bare minimum requirements of considering what it means to engage in real consultation. And then they give us like less than 30 days, sometimes 30, sometimes 60, 30 days to respond. And we don't even have the infrastructure to quickly cite or source data from various sites because, one, it's not safe to have as a public data. Like, we don't even have our own internal like protective mechanisms, let's say like cloud services or internet services to protect that data. And then they want this instant demand, but they don't offer a budget. And they're like, well, if the contract comes through, and thank you for your considerations, and we'll look into getting an archaeological firm and a native monitor per that site. Thank you for that. And then they may or may not even pursue us as monitors or our recommendations. Like, there are times that we do have the power to say, we would recommend you work with this archaeological firm because they're professional or they do their due diligence, but it's off of recommendations. And so it's a challenge because, like, everyone else is on corporate time, corporate dime, and we're doing this painstakingly because we care about our cultural resources. My mom has in excess of 3 feet tall of mail, and most of it is certified. We do not get through them. And so we're always so happy that we do have our allies and our advocates that call us and say, hey, I knew it would be important for us to call you because, one, you may have monitored this years ago, or, oh, I remember talking to you, you said you were concerned about things happening in this area, or, oh, I know this is close to a site and I'm letting you know, because those efforts, that little bit is so very helpful, because I haven't had time to respond to all the letters, and a lot of them, the date has passed, the please respond within this deadline. And it's so frustrating because I'm just sitting here like, we don't operate as business as usual. Like, I can't clock in and get paid for doing all this administrative work, and I want to find a way to do that. I want to navigate this more efficiently, and I want to inspire our communities. Or I'm managing to engage the public around land acknowledgements differently. So I'll give an example. Land acknowledgements has been a really common thing. Someone even said the Bay Area has more land acknowledgements than other areas. However, they're still landless. I'm just like, damn. But in that, so when people ask me, can I do a land acknowledgement, or can I recommend any Indigenous relative to do a land acknowledgement before, and they just kind of ask it casually. I go, might I ask, is there a budget for the Indigenous cultural representative? And they could be like, yeah, we might have some funding. What would you recommend? Because, like, it really does feel spiritually grungy, at least when it comes to land acknowledgement and offering of culture and culture sharing, because culture sharing is in itself part of a ceremony, and it's a part of ritual. It's part of just grounding ourselves, and it feels really spiritually grungy when someone says, what's your artist fee, or how much do you charge it feels really spiritually grungy because, well, sometimes there have been times where we've done this for nothing. At the same time, this is what we do. At least some of our community members, we're not trying to make a living off of it. However, the considerations of what to offer, these people are taking their time, their effort, their travel, food, and sometimes they're taking time off work. And the problem with it is it's not a frugal environment. It's not pursuing something frugal, like this is priceless. What is it worth to you? What is within the realm of opportunity that the organization that wants to facilitate this opportunity can offer? And my mother would say, offer as much as you can afford, because it isn't a matter of, well, I could get somebody else to do it for cheaper. It's, this is valuable and this is necessary, and therefore I want to offer as much as I can. And yeah, different businesses and organizations have different ends of that scale of what that works. You know, that tiny little nonprofit might only be able to possibly offer, that's it. They'll say, hey, by the way, can you let us know how many miles you're traveling? Okay, and that can work. However, as much as you can afford. And I encourage people to be generous in that. And slowly it's caught on. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share, like, when you're seeking something around culture or cultural inclusion, try and offer as much as you can. And sometimes that can mean, you know, your kindness, your medicine, and offering your talent, sharing, because it shows the value. Yeah.
It seems like people are starting to head out. Does anyone have any lingering questions? Or maybe we could develop something for the future, but I need to see what's going on with all of these different projects and stuff. But Kanyon, thank you so much for spending your time, spending an hour and a quarter-ish or more with us. And yeah, I enjoy working with you all the time in the field, and I really respect you, yeah, taking time and being there.
Awesome possum.
Yeah, and you're able to meet some more of our crew. And Jeff, he's our crew too, but he doesn't get as dirty. You can tell by his white shirt. Sorry, Jeff.
I bet you have soft hands.
No, but he made a point of being here because I'm not speaking for you, Jeff, because you're muted, but no, from the ally, being an ally meeting that we had, the Ask Me Anything, we mentioned reaching out to you, and so on board, you know, just making those connections. And again, going back to community, and like you just said, trying to be as transparent as a company. And also it's a reciprocal thing, you know, like it is a relationship. Unfortunately, it is based on money, but it is trying to be as upfront as possible about everything we're doing is a goal. Okay, on that note, I'm going to stop recording. And Jeff, is this okay to try to send it towards Kanyon's way? I'm assuming so. I'm going to save it on the network. And then I'm not sure, Jeff, if you want to do something, post it to the team engagement compass, or I could try, but I keep screwing stuff up.
Sure, if you want to just let me know where it is on the network, I can get it on Compass too.
Okay, great.
And then it might be a large file, so I'm not sure how easy it'll be to send it to Kanyon, but we can certainly try to get it to her.
Yeah, somewhere in the ether web world. Okay, cool. Thank you.